Welcome to Network X. I'm your host, David Fisher. Tonight our topic is on the potential dropping of bombs on Iraq. We're titling this Drop the Sanctions, Not the Bombs. And tonight I have two Iraqi members of the Iraqi community with me. To my direct left I have Walid Al-Kheyat. And thank you, Walid, for being here. And we have Mohamed Al-Qatrani. Welcome, Mohamed.
Thank you.
Mohamed and Walid are both from Iraq. They were in Iraq, I believe, during the original bombing of '91. Is that true?
Correct.
Yes. They are here to talk about the other side of the story, the side that you're not going to get from the major from the major commercial media. So here with independent media, we want to show the other side of the story, and hopefully people will take a second, make a second decision or a second choice on here, and perhaps say something to President Clinton and the war hawks who are about to drop bombs on a civilization such as Iraq, which is composed of people like ourselves, only they are a different skin color, they have a different culture, but they're certainly not criminals and they're certainly not terrorists. I believe we hope to convince some people tonight that we need to not do this. So Walid and Mohamed have brought a film with us that we're going to first show, and then we're going to talk a little bit about that film. So without further ado, we'd like to show the film that they brought with them, if you could do that.
Night after night during the Persian Gulf War, the pictures on our television screens showed a series of aerial targets and subsequent bombings as remote and unreal as the Baghdad we remembered from childhood tales of Arabian Nights. President Bush declared we were attacking only military installations, nuclear weapons facilities, airfields, missile launching sites, oil refineries, and chemical weapons plants. Our smart bombs were to end the war with very little loss of life. The bombardment of Iraq continued from January 16th to the ceasefire on February 27, 1991. 42 consecutive days of bombing. There were 116,000 sorties flown. There were 142,000 tons of bombs dropped on Iraq. In June of 1991, a group of American academic physicians traveled to Iraq to assess the ability of the Iraqi healthcare system to cope with the medical crisis in the aftermath of the Gulf War. The mission was coordinated by Medicine for Peace, a humanitarian organization concerned with the health care of the poor. Dr. Michael Viola, professor of medicine at the State University of New York at Stony Brook, is co-director of Medicine for Peace.
In early February, after 15,000 bombing raids against densely populated areas, he became very worried about the possibility of a large number of civilian casualties.
Your family was hurt? Your father was hurt?
Yes.
Tell me, what happened to your father?
His leg broken and his hand and all face. No face. No, his lips and nose, everything. His eyes.
From the fire?
From the fire.
Medicine for Peace received information from a team of Jordanian physicians that electrical power to hospitals in Iraq had been terminated. We envisioned hospitals without emergency rooms or intensive care units, premature infants in unheated incubators, operating rooms in darkness. 18 of the 20 Iraqi power generating plants were destroyed. This is the large power plant at Al-Hatha, outside of Basra. It was bombed on January 17th, and an additional 13 times, including January 28th, the day of the ceasefire. A number of the plants have been repaired since the war using cannibalized parts. However, unless spare parts were available from outside of the country, it is very likely that the whole electrical system will break down again.
the breakup, the total destruction of the electrical power grid in Iraq by Allied bombardment completely put to a halt all of the kinds of things that that high-tech dependent society counted on. Being able to flush the toilet, having a refrigerator that worked, not having streets full of sewage, being able to open a faucet, turn on a faucet, and have clean water.
Disruption of the power system was the first step in the collapse of the physical infrastructure which supports Iraqi civilian life. Prior to the war, Iraq provided clean drinking water to 90% of its population. This was a sophisticated facility which took water from the Tigris River and provided clean water for the citizens of Baghdad. During the war, this plant was bombed and completely destroyed. None of the surrounding structures were targeted. At the same time that the water purification plants were being hit, pipes and pumping stations, which dispose of sewage, were also damaged by the bombing. Raw sewage backed up into homes, poured onto the streets, and was discharged into the rivers untreated. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the only water source for drinking and cooking, were now contaminated with disease-causing organisms. Unaware of the potential hazards, children here continued to bathe in the polluted Tigris as the only relief from the sweltering heat. Before the war, the vast majority of the Iraqi population had access to a high level of free medical care. Within the past few years, the infant mortality rate had dropped from 80 to 40 deaths per 1,000 births. However, the Medicine for Peace team found the wards of the pediatric hospitals crowded with children seriously ill because of the contaminated water supply. 30 to 40% of the children examined had intractable diarrhea complicated by severe malnutrition. Hania is a 2.5-year-old child, the youngest of 4 children. Her family is of modest means, living on the outskirts of Baghdad. She developed nausea and vomiting and was brought to a local hospital, but because of the lack of medical supplies, was transferred to the Saddam City Hospital for Pediatrics. For 10 days, she had uncontrollable diarrhea and fever. Hania lost consciousness, and on the day of this filming, she died. Thousands of Iraqi children are caught in a vicious cycle. Malnourished, they are susceptible to intestinal infection, which causes further dramatic weight loss and inevitably death. The emergency rooms in Iraqi hospitals are overflowing with children who have contracted waterborne infections. Ali remained in this emergency room for 4 days. No beds were available in the hospital, and he expired without proper medical care. Fatima is a 2.5-year-old child who developed fever, a skin rash, and confusion. She was diagnosed as having typhoid fever by her physician, but this diagnosis could not be confirmed because there are no laboratory reagents and most laboratory equipment is in disrepair. Fatima is being treated with fluids and chloramphenicol. Because of the United Nations embargo, the stores of this drug are dangerously low. Poor sanitation conditions and a general deterioration of infant health has resulted in a 3- to 4-fold increase in the numbers of children with meningitis now being seen in clinics. Most children arrive at the hospital in a semi-comatose condition. Spinal needles have also been embargoed by the UN, and physicians are not able to make precise diagnoses. There are not enough antibiotics to treat the close contacts of those children who have contagious forms of bacterial meningitis, so the epidemic proceeds unabated. Basra, a city of 2 million people, endured 8 years of bombardment during the Iran-Iraq War and was the target of heavy Allied bombing during the Gulf War as well. Intensive civil conflict between rebel Shiites and the Ba'athist government troops following the war resulted in further destruction of the city. Dr. Joseph Thomas was a member of 2 humanitarian missions to Iraq since December 1990.
I have seen
other hospitals. We have seen hospitals in Basra where out of 700 babies we've seen, half, 50% of those who were in the hospital admitted they were malnourished. Malnutrition aggravated by gastroenteritis, typhoid, meningitis, hepatitis. 3 out of 10 transfusions having hepatitis. And why? Because they have no kits to screen any donors. Now, one can go on and give you all the statistics, but I think a distinguished colleague of mine, one time while he was visiting there, if I recall, he said, "The hell with statistics. Here we have a catastrophic epidemic before us. Now we are interested in decimal point, how many, what the rates, who's dying." And that's, I think, it's something that one has to look at.
Serious infections are not the only life-threatening problem affecting children in Iraq. Dr. Ati Atil is the chief of cancer treatment at the Saddam City Hospital for Pediatrics in Baghdad. He was trained at the Children's Hospital Center in Washington, D.C., and he is an internationally known expert in the treatment of childhood malignancies. Although the war was not directly responsible for these unfortunate children developing cancer, treatment is now not available in Iraq to either cure their disease or relieve their suffering. Mohamed is a 2.5-year-old child with acute leukemia. He is the youngest of 3 children and lives in the densely populated Saddam City section of Baghdad. Shortly before the war, he was treated with chemotherapy and went into complete remission. As a consequence of the UN embargo on medicine, Mohamed's physicians have not been able to treat him for a number of months. His disease is now in relapse, and unless he receives treatment, he will surely die. Leukemia is the most common childhood malignancy in Iraq. The medical team examined many leukemic children who were unable to receive treatment because medicine was prevented from entering the country. Dr. William Lapira is a cancer specialist at the State University of New York at Stony Brook.
Many childhood cancers are curable today, and most respond quite well to modern treatment regimens. Over the last several years, Iraq has developed a number of sophisticated medical facilities for the treatment of childhood cancers, staffed by skilled physicians trained both in the United States and in England. I was quite shocked by what I saw on the cancer wards in Baghdad. Children with abdominal tumors were dying because simple surgical procedures could not be performed since the operating rooms had no anesthesia. Other children had tumors curable with chemotherapy, but because of the embargo, no drugs were available. Worst of all, we examined many children who were in intractable pain from advanced cancer who were not receiving any pain medication. We went through all the pharmacies in the hospitals in Baghdad and could not find one single ampule of morphine.
Since August 1990, the food supplies in Iraq have become severely depleted. Before the war, Iraq purchased 70% of its food from abroad at a price of $2.5 billion annually. But the UN embargo abruptly cut off that source. Iraq must now rely on its own food production. Farmlands and irrigation systems have been decimated by the Allied bombing. Seed supplies, fertilizers, and insecticides cannot be purchased from abroad. The lack of infant formula has put considerable stress on families who cannot buy alternative foods for their children and upon mothers who cannot breastfeed. Before the war, the Iraqi government supplied each child with 10 cans of infant formula per month. Since the embargo, only 2 cans per month are available. Mothers dilute this formula, often with contaminated water, resulting in a diet unable to supply sufficient protein, vitamins, or calories to sustain a child.
But there's no doubt.
You're watching Network X. I'm your host, David Fisher. Our topic tonight is the proposed bombing of Iraq. We've titled our show, drop the sanctions, not the bombs. Our guests tonight are two members of the Iraqi community who I have with us tonight, Walid Al-Kheyat and also Mohamed Al-Qatrani. Welcome again.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask them a few questions just so people outside the studio here can get an idea of what it's like in Iraq. Walid, what was it during the bombing of '91? What was your impression? What was it like being there?
Well, I was there like as a resident of Iraq. I was there like scary, putting my families away from the bomb. And I remember we have a house in Basra, but in Qasr. There is just like a King County in Basra. We call it Qasr. So I had to remove my family from Qasr because of there's a lot of ports over there, so we afraid, I mean, during the Gulf War, they were gonna bomb the port and we'll be dying because of that. Because, you know, the bombing was in Iraq, it's just terrible. One day, they said, we were listening to the news, one day they said, we have to bomb Iraq. And I was listening to, I don't remember the station, but I think it's London, what I believe. They said they were going to bomb Iraq at 1 o'clock in the morning. And the bomb started at 2 o'clock, what I believe, and 2 o'clock in the morning. So people, they were like, oh, they were not going to bomb anymore when they said at 1 o'clock on the radio. But after that, when they bombed, so I could imagine. Right now, I'm picturing everything in front of my eyes right now. How people running away from their houses, leaving everything in the house and just run away by themselves. You can see children holding their, just the end of the dresses of their mothers, holding by their hands, very strong, just people. So I had to remove my family from Qasr to Basra, to the center of the Basra. But I sat there, it's the baddest than Qasr. So I had to help people to look for the dying people from the bomb. So I remember I was looking for our neighbor in the center of the Basra when we moved from Qasr to the center of Basra. I was looking for my neighbor, our neighbor, and we've been neighbors for a long time ago, at least 30 years. So I was looking, so I just look the right hand, just the right hand. So I had to look for the left hand. Then I had to look for the head. Then I had to look for the legs. So you couldn't see anything from that human, at least, at all.
So you were looking through the rubble and finding dismembered parts of your friend
Correct.
And neighbor, yes.
Correct.
Mohammed, what is the feeling of the people in Iraq? Did they support Saddam? What was their...
The people in Iraq, like Walid mentioned, there wasn't a fear from the war. And before that, there wasn't a fear from Saddam Hussein himself or his regime, because I was as a student in Iraq, I don't have I don't have any hand in this war. But if you are in Iraq, if you live in Iraq as a citizen in Iraq, you have to go like any occasion, let's say President Day or his birthday or anything, you know, you have to go clap and you have to go dance. Either that or you fire from your job as a worker, or you fire from your school as a student, and you will end on the army, and that means you don't have no choice in Iraq. So the people over there, they don't have no choice. But the people after the war, after 1991 war, after the Iraqi army invade Kuwait, They said, no more, we have to stop this. So that's when the revolution began in Iraq. Out of 18 cities in Iraq, there is 13 cities, it's like, we could say, explode in one day. There is no government no more, nothing, no control. The people control everything. Imagine, 13 cities out of 18, from the north and the south of Iraq. One of the city I live in, like, one of the city, it's Basra, it's my city. The first city, say no more to this war. We don't want this war. We don't want nothing to do with the government, what they doing to our neighbors in the Arab Gulf, to the world. No more for the disaster in Iraq, no more for the hunger, no more for none. We don't have nothing to do with all this. So the people basically not happy, they don't want this. So I'm just trying to send a message to the world outside, or whoever hear me here. Let them separate the government from the people living in Iraq. The people in Iraq, they don't have nothing to do with this.
Now, one of the things they say is that the reason for dropping the bombs is to get the people to overthrow Saddam. Do the people really have those types of resources, and is that really that much, is that feasible to overthrow Saddam?
I lived in Iraq for 24 years over there. We don't have this decision. This is not our decision, because Saddam Hussein, he controlled the country with his regime, with the people working for him. I mean, he controlled everything. We don't have this decision. We was really happy when we saw the American airplane flying over our heads, turn the revolution, and they say, I heard myself, President Bush, he said, we are with anybody side to side who fire a gun against Saddam Hussein or say no more to this war. And 2 days later, you see the Iraqi airplane flying with no zone fly. So I don't know what to tell you. The Iraqi people, they don't have, this is not their decision, because they can't do anything.
Okay, so that's not really a likelihood.
Yeah.
What is it like now in Iraq? We saw the film. There's we've heard 560,000 children have died. What are some of the statistics?
It is getting worse right now. It's getting worse more than when we were there. And actually, the nation of Iraq paying for one person mistake, which is Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein, he is the president of Iraq, or the leader of Iraq. I don't know who gave him that name, leader. I don't think he's a leader, because the leader heard his nation. It's not a leader. The leader has to be in the beginning, not put everybody in the beginning and stay behind them. The situation in Iraq right now, like what we said, it's getting worse than we were there. You can say, and according to the International Real Life Association, there is so many people dying because of diseases, because of polio, because of scabies, because of choleras, because all kind of diseases in Iraq because of unsanitary over there situation. Plus, people right now, they don't have anything to eat. Why? Because of the sanctions on Iraq. So we are asking anybody listening to this show or to this interview, just think even 1 second about those people dying. Dying because of one person. Dying, getting disease because of one person. And if it is this personality with Saddam Hussein has to be out the authority of Iraq, not the nation get the opposite thing, like United States, we're gonna bomb them and give them more bad situation. Because, I mean, just imagine if I came right to your door and I told you I don't have anything to eat. Will you give me something to eat? So you will. But if I came to your home and pull a knife on you and say, hey, you need to give me food because I don't have food, you won't give me food. You won't give me anything. So we are asking with emotionally, with our feelings, asking people to help our children, our families back in Iraq. Our families dying, our families, they don't need to be killed. They need hands to help them, not to kill them. And if they have anything with the authority of Iraq, they have to have it from Saddam Hussein, person to person.
Okay. Thank you. Mohamed, anything? What are some of the things that are going on in Iraq right now?
Yeah, I would like to add, there is like more than 1 million under 5 years of age they die since the war, and there is the average weight for 9 years old Iraqi kid equal to 6 years old in the United States. This is the weight.
Wow.
And there is some minor surgeries with no drugs. They do minor surgeries with no drugs. And the average family wage be equal to $3 a month. And I would like to add the Iraqi dinar equal to every 26 Iraqi dinar equal to 1 cent. Before the war was each Iraqi dinar equal to $3.3. So imagine how the life situation in Iraq right now.
Inflation of almost 1,000% and more in cases.
Yes.
We're just about up with time. I would like to make a note here for our audience that one of the arguments is that Saddam has this stockpile of weapons, that it's a doomsday machine over there. When in fact, if you really look at the terrorism, those chemicals were run through a Swiss chemical company with the Banca Nazionale del Lavoro laundering the chemicals and the funding from United States-backed taxpayer-subsidized loans from this country under the George Bush administration and under the Reagan administration. They were armed by us with our money to the tune of $5 billion. And then when Henry Gonzalez on the House subcommittee investigating that impropriety of funding is supposed to be used for grain, was used for weapons to arm Saddam, he was put under investigation by the CIA, and that was swept under the carpet. So those weapons and chemicals came from this country, and we can stop that war by not arming Saddam. So thank you for being on our show tonight.
Thank you for having us on your show. Thank you.